Philadelphia Eagles have won the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs are out. The NFL season is coming to an end, is now over, except for the parades that are about to take place. But the MLS season is just heating up. We have a lot of new transfers coming in this season, and a lot of things happening overseas with the EFL Cup, the FA Cup, the Champions League, and much, much more. Lots of transfers happening in the MLS, lots of preseasons and training camps going on right now. A lot to discuss, and the season is about to kick off on February 22nd. So there's a lot to cover today. Stick around. I'm Tom House, your host. If you have any comments or questions, email us at houseonthepitch@gmail.com. That's houseonthepitch@gmail.com. Now lace up your boots and let's take the pitch.
That's astonishing. It's absolutely world class.
So yes, the Philadelphia Eagles have won the Super Bowl, but before we get into any of that, there is a lot of things happening right now in MLS. So some of the MLS spotlights, things happening right now. There's some preseason developments, a lot of transfers happening right now, and the power rankings have kind of gotten out now, and there's a lot to talk about there. So for starters, in the preseason developments, there's always the training camps going on, and you can follow all the teams right now live or in person at all the places all over the country. Teams are going down south or heading out west or heading out east to take on new training camps to launch their seasons. And then, of course, there's always their preseason matches. Now, there's been a lot of preseason matches taking place. Most teams, most clubs right now are having 5 to 6 preseason matches, but some teams are having a few more. Now, as far as the preseason matches go, there hasn't been a whole lot of chatter on them and a whole lot of news covering them. It's not really that exciting, I don't think, for most fans. When it comes to preseason matches, everyone knows it's just a way to kind of let a club dip their toe in the water and see what happens. And most notable things that happen are letting some of the tier 2, the bench players, get some touches in, get some plays in, get some passes in, and try out new plays from the coaching staff. But everyone knows that for the most part, the preseason matches aren't the thing that really drive the competition. It's always some of the notable transfers that'll take place. It's what's happening overseas that kind of captures the media in the world of soccer. So for now, the preseason matches are just preseason matches. Lionel Messi is scoring some goals for Inter Miami. There's a lot of things happening in the transfer window. For the time being, the training camps are happening. They're just about to wrap up. The preseason matches are almost all completely underway and almost over. And then we have the FIFA Club Cup to look forward to as well. Now, some of the notable transfers, there has been a few. So there's Romani Kwame, Raheem Edwards, Miguel Almiron. There's been a lot of talk about all three of these players. So to get things started off, Romani Kwame, he's going to Chicago Fire FC. Now, he came over from in Spain. So originally, he's from Mali. He's over in Africa, a landlocked country. But right now, he was playing for Cadiz. So Cadiz CF, haven't heard about them. They're a La Liga 2 team. They play over in Spain. They're a decent team in League 2. So it's the Championship League over in Spain, the Tier 2 league in Spain. And Chicago Fire FC have just picked him up. Decent player, decent midfielder, so he should be a good addition to the Chicago Fire. Now, Chicago Fire, if you haven't seen the rankings from last year, Chicago Fire ranked near the bottom, actually second from the bottom, just above San Jose. They finished 28th out of 29. Now, of course, this year we have 30 teams in the MLS with San Diego FC taking up the new spot as the 30th team in the MLS, but Kwame will come to Chicago, and to be honest, Chicago could really use all the help they can get. So a couple of the quotes from Kwame. So he said, "I'm excited to join the Fire and be a part of this ambitious project. After learning more about the team's vision, it was clear that this is the right place for me. I look forward to contributing on the field, connecting with the fans, and helping the club achieve its goals this season." Now, that's all great stuff. Like I said, I think Chicago really does need all the help it can get. It finished near the bottom. They do have a lot of weaknesses in the midfield, and they do have weaknesses on defense. They actually have weaknesses on forward too, so really they only have room to go. They have nowhere to go but up at this point. Now moving on, another signing that took place recently was Raheem Edwards. So he's going to the New York Red Bulls. Raheem Edwards is going there. He is a phenomenal player, but he also has a lot to back it up. So when he was with Toronto FC, he was with Toronto FC. Most recently, he was with CF Montreal, but before that, he was with Toronto FC. And he was with them when they had that historic treble. So that's where they won the MLS Cup, the Supporter Shield, Canadians Championship in 2017. And he has also played for Canada's senior squad because he is Canadian. Raheem is Canadian. So New York Red Bulls are getting kind of a star here in this deal, and it is a pretty good deal for the New York Red Bulls and for Raheem because he's bringing in a lot of talent. He's bringing in a lot of depth to the team. He's a 29-year-old, so he's not at the end of his career. He's won lots of titles, so he has a lot to offer RBNY in this round, and I think he'll be a really good kind of pairing to have with John Tolkien in the backfield. So. A couple of the quotes that came up from Sandro Schwartz recently. Raheem is a great individual with a proven track record in the MLS, and we're excited to have him with us. He has the great ability on both sides of the ball, and we're looking forward to getting him on the pitch with us soon. So that's from their head coach, Sandro Schwartz. I think, again, I kind of agree with him. This is a really good move for Raheem, a good move for the New York Red Bulls, and just a good thing to be able to watch this season. He's going to a club that was a runner-up this past season for the Champions League Cup or Championship Cup for MLS. So I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of upsides for both sides of this. And lastly, another interesting and kind of dynamic shift that's happened recently in MLS, which kind of rocked the news for a few days there, was Miguel Almiron coming back to Atlanta United. So if you're unfamiliar with Miguel Almiron, he was a part of Atlanta United about 6 years ago. He's a fantastic player. He played really, really well with Atlanta. And there was some leadership ties between Atlanta and Newcastle United when some of the coaching staff went over there, or some of the leadership kind of had some influence over there. And when they did a lot of moves, they ended up taking Miguel Almiron with them. That was 6 years ago, from Atlanta to Newcastle United. So he went from, obviously an MLS team to a Premier League team. And while he was there, he played fairly well. And to be honest, in the last couple of years, and this particularly this current season, I think this is why he was transferred. He just kind of had less time on the ball. Now, it's obviously somebody who's very accomplished in the league. He did a really good job playing for Newcastle United. And Eddie Howe, head coach for the Newcastle United team, he had nothing but the best to say for Miguel Almiron and his transfer out. He wishes him the best. And if you watch any of the videos of Miguel Almiron coming back into the league, coming back into Atlanta, he had definitely a pretty big fan welcome at the airport when he landed in Atlanta. A lot of fans there, a lot of smiling, greeting, shaking hands, doing all that fun stuff. A lot of attention paid to Miguel Almiron when he landed. Then he had his live press conference, which streamed on YouTube, and he had a lot of good things, and he's really excited to play for Atlanta United one more time. And I think this is like the Raheem Edwards acquisition from Red Bull in New York. I think this is just a really good acquisition for Atlanta. I think it's great having Miggy back in with the Atlanta fans. I think they got a lot to look forward to with Atlanta in this season. And I think he'll be a great addition to the team. Now, Atlanta did not do particularly well last season. If you'll recall, they finished 20th, so in the bottom half of the league last season. So similar to Chicago, which you talked about a minute ago, they have kind of nowhere to go but up, essentially. So looking forward for the season, the Romani Kwames, the Raheem Edwardses, the Miguel Almirons, there's a lot of trades, a lot of moves happening, and there's more too. There's also people leaving in the league this season, but those are probably the top three most notable transfers that are happening this season. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. And if there's any more transfers coming out this season, see what happens in the transfer window prior to the start of the season. But there's a lot happening right now. The training camps are full underway, or fully wrapping up, and the preseason matches are fully coming to an end too. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks before the MLS season really finally kicks off, which is happening in 12 days. So less than 2 weeks away, the kickoff for MLS starts, and it'll just be really exciting to see how these other players integrate into the league over the next season. Now, as mentioned before, there is a lot happening right now overseas. So right now, there's the EFL Cup and the FA Cup and the Champions Leagues all happening right now. It's kind of in the heat of it. So before MLS takes off this season, there's a few things wrapping up or still need to happen in the next few months. And I think it'll be really exciting to see kind of what happens overseas, especially in England. So for starters, the EFL Cup, it's nearing the end, similar to the FA Cup. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Liverpool and Newcastle United. So two powerhouse clubs are both doing very well in the Premier League this season. Liverpool obviously at the top, and Newcastle always a top 10 contender in the Premier League. Both doing really, really well this season. Some notable matches that happened recently. So one, if you remember the name, Marcus Rashford, he played for Manchester United, and the last time he played for Manchester United was on December 12th, so he hadn't played with them for a long time. But when Ruben Amorim joined the team not that long ago, he basically benched Marcus Rashford and didn't play him on Manchester United's team anymore. He kind of gave him a bit of a pause there because he said that the Portuguese coach said that he was not meeting the standards, the quote-unquote standards that are required for a player to play for Manchester United. So fast forward a little bit, Marcus Rashford, star player for Manchester United, then gets moved over to Aston Villa. Then on this past Sunday, he went and played against Tottenham Hotspur for Aston Villa and did very well. Aston Villa beat Tottenham Hotspur. So in the fourth round, Tottenham Hotspur gets knocked out. Now moving on over. Now the EFL Cup, it'll be between Newcastle and Liverpool, and that's not slated to take place until March 16th. Now, over the weekend, there were a lot of matches that took place between different clubs. So the FA Cup, obviously, if you don't know much about it, it is the longest standing trophy in football around the world. So it's over, I think it's 180 years old or something like that. Very old trophy. And it basically allows any team, any club in England, no matter what position in the league that they're in, or whatever league they're in, they can compete in the FA Cup. So it's like March Madness on steroids. If you're an organized club of any sort, so in the EFL Cup, it's the top four clubs. So it's the Premier League, number 2 is the Championship League, and then League 1, League 2. Those are the top four leagues in England. They're all allowed to play in the EFL Cup, the Carabao Cup. And then there's the FA Cup, which is different, or the Emirates Cup. The FA Cup, though, is even bigger. So it's not just the top four. It's the top four plus dozens more leagues. So pretty much any organized team that has any kind of semblance of a team, anybody who picks up a ball and kicks it around in a league and they're organized, they're allowed to compete in the FA Cup. So over the weekend, now, so back up and pause for a second. Not all the top clubs or tiered club teams play until later in the competition, later in the season. So they let the little guys fight it out first, and then the big boys come in later on in the season, and then they compete. And that's what's starting to happen now. That's where we're at right now in the FA Cup and the EFL Cup for that matter. But the FA Cup, a lot of matches over the weekend, but one notable one was Liverpool losing to Plymouth. They lost to Plymouth in kind of a terrible fashion. It wasn't just that they lost, though, and I have a bit of a thought on this, and it made me think, do some clubs not really care about their standings for certain cups? Now, the obvious answer is to say that, of course, any club in England would love to win the FA Cup. But at the same time, Plymouth, Argyle, the Pilgrims, they are the last club, so again, there's Premier League, Championship League, League 1, League 2. So Plymouth plays in the Championship League. They play in the second level league in England. And they are the worst team in that league. They're the bottom of the second tier. And then Liverpool is the top of the Premier League right now. So Liverpool has a lot on their plate right now. And I think this is kind of what happened. So Here's just a thought. Maybe some clubs don't care about certain cups because right now Liverpool's on track to win the Premier League because they're at the top of the league. They could possibly win the EFL Cup because they're going to be playing Newcastle for that one in March. And they're doing really, really well in the Champions League in Europe as a whole, playing against lots of teams there. They're not in the elimination rounds right now, which we'll get to in a minute on the Champions League. But overall, Liverpool has a lot of matches on their schedule. So what is the motivation for a club like Liverpool to win? Now, Arne Slot, Liverpool's head coach, he just took a pause on playing a lot of players. Most notably, he didn't play Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, and Gakpo. He didn't play a lot of players that you'd normally see in a high-level game. Certainly, these are the players that will be there for the Champions League games and the competitions there. They might be players that come out later after substitutions, but they're going to be players that are showing up regardless. But it's not that they didn't get their playing time. They weren't even on the list. They weren't even on the bench. These guys didn't even show up. It was all of Liverpool's second-tier teams or second-tier players, all their bench players. And I mean, sure, there was a few notable players that did show up, like Jota, and they had Darwin Nunez playing for them. But overall, it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of fire to get the ball, to get down the field, and to really win that match. It didn't seem like the few, like, quote-unquote star players that they did have, it kind of seemed like it was a chore for them to have to even show up and play for that game, like they didn't really want to. So it just begs the question, do some of the Premier League teams, when they get forced to play into all of these tournaments worldwide all the time, I mean, over the summer, there's Man City's in Dortmund and AC Milan. All these top club teams are going to come over and play the Club World Cup, which is going to be an amazing tournament. It should be an amazing tournament. But they get pulled in so many different directions that you wonder sometimes if they're just say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and lose this one. I'm going to let my star players rest because right now we have the opportunity for in Liverpool's case, they have the opportunity to solidify themselves as the top team in the Premier League. They're going to play Everton on Wednesday. So if I'm Arne Slot, again, if I'm Liverpool's head coach, Arne Slot, and I'm thinking I got all these star players I can give a few more days off to, or I can win another tournament when I'm already about to win 3 more. Do I really need to win this one? Now, Arne Slot did look disappointed, and he had great things to say about the home team hosting Liverpool. He said they played a great match, and I guess theoretically they did. I think they came out with a lot of fire, and it's whenever, the David and Goliath thing happens, whenever a big club comes to your small town team and you get an opportunity to take down Goliath, of course, it's going to be really exciting. It was awesome to watch and see all the fans really get into it. But genuinely, it didn't seem like Liverpool even came close to playing to what they normally do, what their normal standards are. And after Arne Slot said great things about Plymouth, it just seemed like I didn't get the impression that he really cared that they had to move on and move away from the FA Cup. And I think that's kind of interesting because the prize money is, last I looked, the prize money for the EFL Cup is about $100,000, which is relatively insignificant for major clubs, while the FA Cup is, I think it's a $2 million purse. So my thought, my key takeaway, or I guess the closing thought on this, my guess is that Arne Slot and the gang, they kind of went there thinking, we'll put in our second-tier club or second-tier players, and we'll let these guys play against the worst team in the Championship League. We'll let them play these guys, and we'll definitely win this match because we have our second. And then, later in the game, I'll put in Darwin Nunez. At the start of the game, I'll throw in maybe 1 or 2 kind of key players. I'm going to have the rest of the guys the day off, and we'll just walk on through because this is a lower club team. And in the back of his mind, I have to imagine that Arne Slot and the gang were thinking, you know what, even if we lose this, we might win the Champions League, the Premier League, and the EFL Cup because we're all still the top contenders for all of those things. So that's some of the takeaways happening right now over in England. More broadly now, there's some Champions League action happening right now that I think is going to be fantastic. So happening really soon, starting tomorrow, Paris Saint-Germain, Man City, Real Madrid, Juventus, Dortmund, all going to be playing tomorrow on Tuesday, February 11th. So Paris is up first, playing Brest. Another that'll be a really exciting matchup to watch this week. But I think the big one outside of, and these are all going to be pretty good matches. So right now in the Champions League, if you're not familiar with it, they're in the playoff knockout round. So all the teams playing right now, all the teams not playing right now are taking a well-earned rest, but all the teams playing right now are basically playing for their survival to stay in the Champions League. 2 teams that really stand out that should not be there right now are Manchester City and Real Madrid. And I mean, Manchester City with Erling Haaland, Real Madrid with pretty much everybody like Kylian Mbappe. 2 teams that are just stacked with talent are in the knockout round. And the most interesting part about this is Manchester City is going to be playing Real Madrid. So they're playing tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and that should be just a really exciting matchup. And then after that, so the first match will obviously be a home game for one of the clubs, so it'll be a home game for Manchester City. Then after that, they'll go over to Real Madrid. Well, they'll play in Real Madrid, and Manchester City will have to win over there. What do I think will happen there, though? it's really anyone's guess, but Real Madrid is really kind of hungry for it, and Manchester City's just been on the ropes for so long now. I talked about them in a couple episodes ago. I talked about Manchester City, and if you haven't heard any of their recent financial woes, they're basically, and you take a lot of different takes from it. They come under a lot of scrutiny with basically how they've handled their finances, and they've had hundreds of allegations against them at this point. And ever since a lot of them come out, they've really struggled to play at home and internationally. And now they're in a knockout round against Real Madrid. And I think, to be truthful, I think they'll kind of take a backseat again, because even in the EFL Cup match that they had this past weekend, they struggled. They barely won, but they did win against kind of a lower ranking team. So going up against Real Madrid, if they're not really humming on all pistons, I think they'll have a really hard time against Real Madrid. The other matchups look like they'll be pretty good, pretty competitive. Hard to see who the clear victor will be. Juventus is playing PSV. Sporting CP is playing Dortmund. All really good matchups. All really exciting. Just some other clubs that are in the mix right now. So AC Milan. So Christian Pulisic being in there, and then Bayern Munich also playing. Some really good Championship League matchups coming up soon. All right, taking things off the pitch, as promised at the beginning of the segment, at the beginning of the episode earlier, we mentioned that the Philadelphia Eagles have won the Super Bowl. Yes, the Philadelphia Eagles have won the Super Bowl. Now, if you're just tuning in and not really paying attention to anything or living under a rock, you probably didn't know that the Super Bowl was taking place. Well, let me fill you in. It was basically between the same teams as it was last year. So last year, the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Kansas City Chiefs won. This year, the exact same matchup with the exact same teams almost. A few different big key name changes for the Philadelphia Eagles. Same quarterback, same head coaches. But great game overall. But it was really a standout game for the Philadelphia Eagles, because if you watch that matchup, the Eagles, they started off in the first couple minutes looking like it wasn't going to be an evenly defensive match, because both teams had possession with no score. And then the Eagles kind of just took off. They started scoring touchdown after touchdown, and Patrick Mahomes, basically for the rest of the entire night, could not get anything going. I think by the end of the third or fourth quarter, near the end of the game at least, he had about 7 sacks against him. So he was having a really hard time getting the ball out of the pocket and getting anything going on offensively. At the very end of the game, he threw a bomb downfield, which was really cool to see, but it was a little too late. And unfortunately, not enough to seal any kind of victory for the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Philadelphia Eagles just got out there and played a defensive game throughout the entire night. Saquon Barkley, the running back for the Eagles, he didn't have a stellar night. He had a lot of receptions throughout the night, but didn't really get anything going offensively when it came to the run game, which is what he's known for. And my take on all of it was that I think the Kansas City Chiefs came in there, obviously with the goal to win. Same with the Philadelphia Eagles, but it looked like their only strategy for the Kansas City Chiefs was shut down Saquon Barkley. That was it. Just shut down the run game, and then they'll be fine to win the Super Bowl, because Patrick Mahomes will just be Patrick Mahomes. But that wasn't enough. I think that the Eagles, on the other hand, they came in with the thought of, we're going to really dominate defensively. Other than shutting down defensively, they were going to get some passes going, some runs going, and just play good old-fashioned football. Nothing really fancy on the Eagles side. Now, heading into the game, there was a lot of controversy outside of Taylor Swift, because there's always controversy with Taylor Swift, but the camera didn't shine on her too much. It did once when the fans booed her, which I kind of felt bad for her, because she didn't really get a whole lot of love leading up to the match, but understandably, the fans did not appreciate her having some spotlight there. And I think coming this morning and this afternoon throughout the rest of the week, there's going to be some speculation as to her being a bad luck charm for the Kansas City Chiefs going forward. And I'm sure a lot of KC fans will say she should not come to any more of the games. I think the hype that Travis Kelce put his team through and the drama between Patrick Mahomes' wife and Taylor Swift and all that just didn't help at all. I think once you get your eye off football, off the game, which the Eagles clearly did not do, once all those kind of stupid dramatic things take place in the NFL or in any high-level sports matches, I think it just totally takes away from the focus on the game. And then you start making really bad passes. I think by the end of the game, I think Travis Kelce had 1 reception, no touchdowns. He had 3 targets and 1 reception. He was barely doing anything the entire game like the rest of the Kansas City Chiefs. So having distractions like that just don't help a team. I think focusing on the romance behind the scenes doesn't help. I think the pop culture stuff doesn't help. And, leading up to it, only thing I knew about the Eagles in the pop culture world maybe was that Travis Kelce, the former center for the Eagles, has his podcast and does lots of stuff, and he has some Doritos commercials or something. But outside of that, the Eagles aren't really making a lot of waves on the social media scene. I'm sure you could find a bunch of clips and stuff, but not to the level that the Kansas City Chiefs are doing. So really, all that is just a huge distraction. I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason that they lost, but why risk all that when you have so much on the line at the end of your career? You're going for the triple win. Why even have the distraction to begin with? Why not just get on with football like the Eagles did? And they went into the third quarter. I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs even scored until the third quarter. So a pretty big blowout game for the Eagles overall. Another notable star mention, though, that showed up for the game was Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. So I had no idea this was the fact. But he is the first sitting president to ever attend a football game, which I find kind of surprising because George W. Bush was a fairly popular president. So was Bill Clinton, fairly popular president and a sports fan. Even all the way back to Reagan, though, and I looked into it, and yeah, Donald Trump was the first sitting president to ever attend a Super Bowl game. Just kind of a fun fact. Not getting it into politics on the MLS podcast here on House on the Pitch. That's not how we roll, but I just thought that was a very interesting fact. All right, wrapping things up today, we got a couple of mailbag questions that we got from the listeners today. First up, we have, with the Super Bowl hype in full swing, what can the MLS learn from the NFL when it comes to growing in the U.S., growing the sport in the U.S.? Sorry. What can the Super Bowl in full swing, what can the MLS learn from the NFL? Well, I think there's a lot of things that the MLS can learn from it. I think notably, don't have your girlfriend show up in the box and then have the fans boo her the entire time. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the thing that they should definitely take away. Don't let your girlfriend show up. For all the star players, don't let your girlfriend show up in a box suite so all the fans can boo that person. You probably just have a lot of talking to do when you get home. I think you'll have long conversations I'm just advice for the players and the coaches. You'll have long conversations with your spouse or significant other when you get home. And you'll probably have a lot of apologizing to do on social media. So just avoid all that. And crazy thought, maybe just focus on football, your sports. Focus on soccer, focus on what you got to do to get the game going. But more seriously, what can they do? I think just getting all the fan base around it. So the Super Bowl obviously does a really, really good job building up the hype. And I have to look back at even the last year, the hype around LA Galaxy and the New York Red Bull matchup. It just didn't seem like a lot of people even knew it was happening. It was the championship matchup, and nobody really knew it was happening in the U.S. So I think finding ways to really build up hype and like getting the celebrities on board is really good. I think if clubs like Austin, so Matthew McConaughey is a part of that. I think if he can get involved with that somehow, if a team like Austin goes and they have a celebrity there, it's a lot easier to build up, hype around it. That's not the case for every team. I mean, 30 teams, it's not like they're all owned or partially owned by celebrities. So what can you do to really just get the fan engagement, but not just the fan engagement? The fans are already going to watch it. You have to get people who are not fans to watch it, to care about it. That's what the Super Bowl is really all about. It's creating this environment where everybody gets together on Sunday. And people who don't watch football end up watching football, right? That's the key point. People who don't care, is all the memes come out, right? People show up to a Super Bowl party and for the first time all year, they have to talk about football. It's like kind of an ongoing joke, but we know it's true. And you kind of have to do the same thing with MLS. You have to get people talking about the thing that they don't normally talk about. So whether that is getting the celebrity endorsement, coming up with fun commercials, whatever it is, you just need to build up the hype around it. And I think that would be really big for the MLS. And to be honest, it's not the Champions League, it's not the FA Cup, it's not the EFL Cup, right? It hasn't have that magnitude or that level yet, but it could. And I think that would go a long way if it just becomes this thing where, I think it was on a Saturday that the Cup took place last season with Galaxy and New York Red Bulls. They did a really good job promoting it inside of MLS, and it was exciting to watch, but that was it. It was in December. It was kind of a weird time of year, and I know there's been a lot of discussion around, should we move the season to reflect that of the European leagues, and it'll probably happen eventually. It'll probably happen in 2026, but for 2025, it's 2025-26 season. It's not going to happen yet, but it could happen next year, early next year. So keep an eye out for that. But that's just it. It just needs to be a lot of hype. It has to be a cultural thing, and that just takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. They're going to have to get to a point where people want to bring over their favorite dish with their neighbors or friends, or go to someone's house, or go to Buffalo Wild Wings and watch the game there and get hyped up for it there. And people who don't normally watch it will have to want to make those memes and get excited about watching football. So that's what I think. Next question here. Which MLS team do you think will surprise everyone this season, and which team might disappoint? Well, I think it can go a lot of different ways. So obviously last year, Miami did really well. Columbus did really well. Cincinnati, Salt Lake. So it'd be easy to say, those are the teams that are going to do really, really well this year. And New York City lost a key player to Man City. One of the teams that I think will do really well, though, is Portland. I think Portland has a lot of upside. I think Houston, so there's 3 teams in Texas. I think Houston could be one of the teams that does reasonably well this year. I think they finished off rather strong last year, but they still weren't a top 5 club. So I'm not going to pick one of the top 5 clubs. So 2 teams I would say to keep an eye on this year right now. I think Houston Dynamo, they just have a lot of potential, and Portland as well. I think they've done a lot of things. And if I could pull out even one more team, if I could say someone else to watch, I think it's because of what they do with youth development. And I think eventually this is going to pay off big. So MLS and MLS Next and Generation Next, all those youth organizations that happen right now in MLS it's growing every year, and that investment hasn't paid off yet. It's going to take time. I think a lot of people look at the academies maybe overseas and see these major talents coming out of these clubs, and so these kids basically go to school and they don't learn. They just learn soccer. They just play soccer all day long for their club, and they get paid to do it. And over the years, they just weed more and more of them out. But it's very competitive getting into these academies overseas, and it's really tough to stay in them once you're in them. But a lot of star players have come out of them. But anyway, I say all that to say it takes time for youth to develop. And one club that's done it very well is Philadelphia Union. So I think for that reason, this could be where we start to see some of those investments pay off, because it's going to take about 5-6 years for that to pay off. And I think Philadelphia Union is one of the clubs that could probably do that. So I'd say keep an eye on Houston Dynamo. They've done some moves over the season, over the off season, and I think they have a lot of upside there. I do think Portland is always a team that I think they just did surprisingly poorly last season. They finished a little more poorly than most people would have thought, and I think they just couldn't get a lot of things together at their away games, and they did struggle once in a while at home, but did okay. Overall, they could have just done better on their away games. And then I think Philadelphia Union will start seeing some of the benefits, or reaping the benefits of all their investments that they've done overseas. So those are kind of my top 3. Who's going to do what in this off season? And that is it. Those are all the questions that I have for today, just 2 today. But if you ever have any questions, feel free to email us at houseonthepitch@gmail.com. That's houseonthepitch@gmail.com. This is the House on the Pitch podcast. I'm your host, Tom House. And until next time, we'll see you next time on the pitch. All right, that's all we have today for today's episode of House on the Pitch. I'm your host, Tom House. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us on houseonthepitch@gmail.com. That's houseonthepitch@gmail.com. We'll see you next time on the pitch.